Welcome back, dog lovers, to this episode of Dear Dog Fanatic. I'm your host, Kirsten Matthews, but you can call me Kay. I am a dog mom of 3 and a virtual dog trainer. My company is called the Canine Detective. So today we are so fortunate to have yet another round of listener write-in questions. So thank you to those who submitted. As always, if you have any questions after the episode, feel free to comment below or shoot me a DM, and I am happy to elaborate. So the first question I got on Instagram, and it's on the topic of caring for a senior or elderly dog. This user really enjoyed last week's episode of the podcast and wanted to know if I had covered this topic, and I have not yet. So let's get into it. Their question is, have you covered the topic of caring for a senior or elderly dog? And they've provided us with a little bit of context. So they say, I'm just trying to ensure a good quality of life for my elderly greyhound who is 11 years old and will be 12 in May. He had surgery on his lipomas in April 2025 and again in February 2026. He is an ex-racing greyhound who we have had since he was about 6 years old. So quick math here, they've had this dog for about going on 6 years now because we're pretty quick into May. And now this senior greyhound has both retired from racing and also is in the golden years of his life. So unfortunately, a localized tumor has rapidly grown on his skin and rib cage. I know that you're not a vet, and I had my vet check him today, but it's not an option to do any further surgeries. And that was going to be my question. I love when people provide this additional context when they're writing in, because of course my question is always going to be, have you asked the vet first, just to rule out any sort of medical concerns. But this is important and something that's really worthwhile noting, and we'll cover this in another episode. This is a very personal conversation, one that one should have with their vet. But as our dogs enter the senior years, we want to ask ourselves, at what point does their quality of life deteriorate so much that is unfair to keep them in that state? And not even just that, but when they are senior, does it make sense for them to have surgery? In some cases, the answer is yes. As we saw even in this listener's write-in, last year and this year, he's had a couple of surgeries, but the vet is saying, at this point, surgical intervention is not going to help this dog, which this owner sounds like they're very receptive to, and is now wondering what else to do. This listener says, overall, he seems happy enough, although his appetite has reduced in the past 2 to 3 weeks. I take him for one 15 to 20-minute walk each evening, and he gets several opportunities during the day to go to the toilet. He definitely is slowing down, but he still likes to trot after a ball. He was never really into games, but loves a plush toy or anything with a squeaker. And I think this listener is just looking for just general advice about how to care for their senior dog. They've gone through the medical intervention route. They've done as much as is available to them at this point in time. And now we look at quality of life. So what can you do to care for a senior elderly dog, particularly one that does have ongoing medical issues or medical complications? Might seem annoying for me to say, well, talk to your vet, but my recommendation is still going to be, in addition to, I will give you some tips and tricks you can do to ensure that you're more likely to keep the quality of life of your senior dog as high as you can for as long as possible. But I think it is still worth asking the vet, what are the telltale signs that the quality of life is deteriorating? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is just because this dog's appetite has reduced in the past 2 to 3 weeks. Now, sometimes a reduction in appetite can be an indicator of pain. It can be an indicator of stress. And so this could be attributed to the fact that he has another tumor. So then it becomes a question of, the tumor is inoperable. Is it causing him a great deal of pain or not? And I'm assuming that the vet has probably already talked to the listener of what are the signs to look for with respect to whether or not the tumor is causing the dog a lot of pain. But in case that conversation hasn't been had, or for other listeners that are going through the same thing, please ask your vet for the signs that you should be looking for in your dog that are an indication that, hey, something isn't right here. For senior dogs, they are more prone to things like arthritis, joint pain, things of this nature. It's possible, as an ex-racing greyhound, that this listener's pup has already had some previous racing injuries back in the day. We don't know this for sure or not. I don't have that context, but I'm just bringing this up because that could be pain related if they've had a repetitive strain injury or something like that. One really important thing to look out for here is he no longer doing the things that he loves to do? If this is a greyhound that really enjoys walks, if one day he is less inclined to go on his walk, if that becomes a pattern, that might be a cause for concern. Some of the things I'm going to recommend has to do with preventing further injuries that one would recommend to any sort of senior dogs. These are things like a lot of vets don't recommend playing fetch with your dog because it can cause a lot of stop-start motions, which can impact their joints. Similar to humans, how your coaches or your gym teachers growing up were really annoying and saying, you need to stretch, you need to warm up before you go out and play the game. It's the same with our dogs, except they don't understand the concept that they need to be stretching and warming up before they can do 0 to 100 zoomies, right? But the lack of warming up can cause those injuries, and that's something you especially want to pay attention to in your senior dog. If he's just trotting after the ball, he's not making, quick turns as he races and is going on his heels, or, we're not at risk of him rolling over on his leg, hip-wise, or his knees, then that maybe fetch is still okay for him. But I'm just bringing this up as something to keep an eye on. Back to the zoomies of it all. One reason why a lot of senior dogs do get some of these repetitive injuries is because the surfaces that they're walking on aren't good for their paws. Things like carpets and rugs are really, really good because dogs of all ages slip a lot on hardwood floors and like linoleum floors because their paw pads can't get good grip on it, as opposed to, the various surfaces that we find outside. If the surfaces in your house are pretty slippery, I would just make a little path for your dog. Either put down a bunch of rugs, you can create a pathway using rugs. And if your dog is feeling that pain or is feeling unsure, they might naturally gravitate towards using the more firm and less slippery surface area of the rugs. So that is one suggestion. Taking a look at their appetite, his appetite. Follow-up questions I would have that I'm sure your vet already knows, and so probably addressed this already, but is he generally a picky eater? I know that you say here that his appetite has reduced. I would take a look at, is that across the board? Is that just his regular kibble? I don't know what you feed your dog, so this is me making assumptions here, because how concerning that is might depend on whether or not the pup is more so being picky with the food that they have and want it to be changed up versus lacking appetite at all. But even saying that, a lot of people are very quick to dismiss a dog being picky because they're not wanting to eat a particular food. But I would also take a look at, is what you're feeding your dog actually good for them nutritionally? I'm not an expert in this area. I have people that I could recommend you to, first of which would be to go speak to your vet to make sure that the amount of nutrients that your dog is getting in their diet is appropriate for where they are at this stage of life. I don't know if he's already switched to senior dog food as opposed to the generic all life. Again, that's a conversation to have to your vet. This is me really just spitballing here, throwing everything that I would consider at you, just so you can make the determination for yourself of what's going to be best for your dog. Other things to take care of your senior dog. I would, if you haven't already, sit down and make a list of what is it that they actually enjoy in life. And that seems very flippant, but as a dog mom of 3, I can tell you that my dogs do have overlapping interests, but they also have very distinct personalities and needs. So I can already tell you, like, if I was to design a perfect day for my sight hound, a Silk and Wind hound named Velma, that would be a very different day to the perfect day of my little Cavalier King Charles Spaniel Lilo. They are different breeds of dogs, yes, but also just very different personalities. So take some time to really think about what it is that your dog actually really enjoys doing. Because I could say things like, oh, let's teach them some new tricks to keep their mind engaged. This works particularly well for dogs that have high energy needs or high mental stimulation needs. A lot of herding breeds, working breeds, dogs like poodles that are highly intelligent. This is something that a lot of people will end up skipping out on as their dog ages because they think, oh, my dog isn't as active now. They don't need as many runs. But go speak to the senior people in your life. And this also varies, right? We can't say that, oh, this senior dog is the same as this one over here. It's the same with humans. So this is not to say that a senior dog can't be active, but if we are taking on the hypothetical where the dog, isn't at the point where they can or should be going on runs anymore, which I think your dog fits into this category just based off what you're written and I'm assuming the recommendations of your vet, it doesn't necessarily mean that they wouldn't enjoy having some puzzle games, doing scent work, odor detection. These don't need to be big fancy things of like going to classes or competing in trials. These can be things that you set up in your home or in your yard. There are a lot of really great resources online. If this is an area of interest to you, feel free to shoot me a DM and I'll send the resources that I'm aware of your way that you can take a look into on your own time. But really, this is me taking a look at I'm laughing because this is going to maybe sound like buzzword salad, but in addition to being a dog trainer, one of the ways that I view myself is as a canine life coach. What does that mean and why do I identify that way? Is because I'm not just looking at how do I change your dog's behavior. I'm also looking at their health. I'm looking at their lifestyle. Are their needs being met? And a lot of what I've talked to you about today is management. It's not trying to change who the dog is or what their behaviors are. It's making changes to their lifestyle and environment to better suit them. And that is what I believe is more on the lifestyle end of it rather than the training end of the spectrum here in terms of recommendations. I'm just going to read over this again just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, he goes 15 to 20 minute walk each evening and lots of opportunities during the day to toilet. Not a super high toy drive, but loves a plush toy or anything with a squeaker. Okay, and this is me extrapolating on my knowledge of both my dogs and other dogs. I'm curious that after his this 15-20 minute walk, does he seem tired and satisfied? Is he, lying down for a nap or relaxing? Is he happy to be home at the end of that? Is he still eager to be going on those walks? The answers to those questions will help us inform of whether or not that structure is still a good routine in his schedule. The squeaker toys and the anything fluffy, I think is what you said. Loves a plush toy or anything with a squeaker. Yeah, okay. So he's a sight hound. Likely probably has a bit of prey drive. Correct me if I'm wrong. Very common in that breed. Does he like to eviscerate things? Meaning, does he like to rip apart the stuffies and pick out all of the fluff? If so, there are canine enrichment toys out there. Basically just a safer way of meeting that need of evisceration. That way he's not accidentally eating the fluff, but also some of these toys you can actually put back together. So the dog still gets the joy of tearing the toy apart, but then you as the owner can put the toy back together. So that way you're not needing to rebuy all these plush toys all the time. Again, with the squeaker, this can also be kind of prey drive related. I would be curious to hear. My assumption would be that he's probably not at the point with his surgeries and where he's at with the tumor where the vet is recommending that he does runs. Please message me and let me know if that is the case or not. If he has the vet's go ahead to run and sprint. And the reason I'm going to bring this up for those who don't know, a lot of the times the sight hounds can be quite lazy, but they're also very fast. Their kind of ideal form of exercise is, can I be let off leash and run around and do tons of zoomies and then pan out? as opposed to some dogs that love going for like the miles and miles runs and hikes. Doesn't mean that sighthounds can't enjoy those things, but what they're bred for is to run fast over flat surfaces. Why I'm bringing this up is because if he does have a bit of that prey drive, there are games you can play with him that address that he can practice running after something and catching it, and he might really enjoy that. But I'm not going to recommend you do that without your vet saying that he's allowed, because I don't want to tell you to do that and then the tumor ruptures or something goes wrong. So again, please defer to the medical professionals before picking up a new exercise routine for your dogs. I think that's pretty much everything I can answer for you with the information that I have, but please reach out. I'm more than happy to elaborate, and I really hope that you find some fun things to do with your senior pup. He's very lucky to have someone who is so conscientious of his needs during this time in his life. Okay, coffee break. I don't know if I'll keep this in or not. We'll see. This is not sponsored. This is Tim Hortons. We're not sponsored by Tim Hortons. Obviously, look at the size of this channel. But I am moving to Ireland later this year, which means no more Tim Hortons for me. And so I'm probably having them more often than I should, but it's very nostalgic and I'm going to miss it when I'm no longer in Canada. Our next question is on the topic of dogs that are excessively licky. And I laughed when I got this message because my Frenchie is like this, and I'll get into it once we actually get into the question in the story. So this listener says, my dog licks the floor like it's her job. And I'm emphasizing that because job is all caps. Not one spot where something interesting was spilled, the whole thing, like she's mopping the house. Is this anxiety, something else? And because this was DM'd to me over on Threads, I was actually able to ask some follow-up questions. So I said, thank you. I'll cover this topic. I wanted to know, does she lick anything else this way? You being her human or herself? The response I got was, the couch or her bed sometimes her own paws, but less these days, people's legs if they're wearing shorts, but that might be a flavor or a salt thing. Okay, this one is going to be maybe a long answer because there could be many, many reasons for this. Some are medical and some are behavioral. So I'm going to get into the high-level overview of the medical first and then follow that up with go ask your vet. And then assuming they give your dog the clean bill of health, come back, listen to this, and I'll talk about the behavior aspects. And why I say this is because I don't want you to try everything under the sun to address this behavior, and then we find out, oh, that's because there's something wrong with her pancreas or something like that. Because then that could get worse. Again, before any sort of behavior modification plan, any dog trainer, behavior consultant worth their salt, that being a pun there, but maybe it's not that punny because I've addressed it, will recommend that you go speak to a vet first to make sure there's not any medical reasons behind this behavior. We don't want to be pushing that metaphorical rock up the hill only for it to roll back down again, because that's not fun for any of us. One of the major reasons why dogs lick the floor could be related to some sort of gastrointestinal upset. Sometimes it's nausea related, things like this. So you've already told me that this is definitely not related to something that was spilled. And normally I would say, are you sure? Because even though we think that we clean things up really well, our dog's nose is so much better than ours is. Could be they're smelling something from weeks ago, even if you've cleaned the area. But because you also clarified that this is happening over a wide area, it's not just this one spot, it's spots on the floor all over the house, I'm inclined to believe that it's unlikely that you dropped burgers everywhere in your living room, in the bathroom, in the kitchen, etc. So we'll operate on the assumption that it's not just that your dog's sniffer is way better than yours and they're just sniffing out residue. So our first port of call was the obvious. Are they smelling something? And that's why they're licking. The answer here is probably no, because of the extra context you provided me. So my next thought would be, is it medical related? In that case, I unfortunately am not your gal. I am not a licensed veterinary professional, so I'm going to refer you in this moment to your dog's preferred vet of choice. Describe the situation, emphasize to them that this isn't just one spot. Add in the additional context of it is not just the floor. Sometimes it's her own paws, and sometimes it's people's legs. And your vet might come to the conclusion that even if it's not something medical related in the sense that it's something gastrointestinal, it could be nutrient related. It could be that something is missing from your dog's diet, which again, I am not a licensed veterinary dietitian, nutritionist, anything of the sort. Your vet might not even be, but your vet will have someone that they can refer you to talk about what may or may not be missing from your dog's specific diet. If your vet does not have those answers, again, feel free and reach out to me. I have some people in my network that I can refer you to the point where even if they can't help you specifically, they could tell you what you should be looking for when it comes to feeding your dog an appropriate diet. Yeah. So in the short answer, if it's not medically related, it could be diet related. Assuming that it is not diet related, now we look at behavioral, and then now you're in the right spot. Now we can work together because that is my wheelhouse. So if it is related to behavior, this could be related to boredom or stress. That is the first easy port of call. A lot of our unwanted behaviors that our dogs are doing are related to some sort of anxiety or stress. Then you and I need to sit down and have a much longer conversation of what that is. And in order for me to rule out whether or not, yes, it is anxiety and stress, I would need to ask you a few more questions, because if that is the case, there's likely other behaviors that your dog is exhibiting that is a sign that it could be anxiety, stress, or boredom, but maybe that's just not as obvious to you, which is totally fine. You're not the dog professional. That's why you talk to folks like me for these kinds of things. So if this is the case, do not feel bad. It's not your fault, but it is something that you can fix, and I or someone else like me can help you do that. And the other thing is anxiety, stress, and boredom. Sometimes they're related and sometimes they're different. So what the other symptoms are would point me in a direction of whether or not it is one of those three things. That is why my practice is called the Canine Detective. And for those of you listening, I'm pointing over here. Behind me in my background, I have this cute little sign with my company logo. One of my really good long-term friends actually designed my company logo, and another one bought this little sign plaque for my office with that design. Why I'm going off on this tangent is why I'm called the Canine Detective is because I look for all the clues and put them together to solve the mystery of why your dog is doing what they're doing, and then come up with a plan to solve it. It can be a complicated process depending on what the mystery is, in this case being anxiety, boredom, or stress. Indications of anxiety depends on what your dog is like. There can be some signs like them chewing on certain things. Sometimes dogs will nook as a self-soothing tendency, which may or may not be a sign of anxiety. Do they nervously bite at themselves? This is also a really good thing to see if you have more than one dog and one of them starts biting is the wrong word because it's not a bite, but it's like nibbling. It's like picking at themselves. Or if you have another dog, sometimes they'll pick at the other dog, and that can be a sign of anxiety. It's like a self-soothing tendency. It's like how those of us who are neurodivergent, sometimes we have our fidget toys. The dog's version of that sometimes is licking the paws, biting at themselves, biting at other dogs, nibbling rather than biting. I'm just trying to be conscious of my terminology here because the words that I would use to describe something might be different from how you would, and I'm just trying to make sure we're all on the same page. That you're not going to go after listening to this and say, hey, Kay says when my dog bites me, that's a sign of anxiety, which, don't get me wrong, could be. But if that is the case, please don't just leave it at that. Please, let's address this. And it's why I'm never going to diagnose your dog, because I'm not a vet, but even within a behavior consultant capacity, I'm not going to say, this is what your dog has from a listener write-in. We would need to sit down and have more of a conversation because I have a lot of follow-up questions. Depending on whether or not it is stress, boredom, or anxiety, what I would prescribe to you or what I would suggest to you would be different. Some of those things might be something like if your dog has chronic boredom, they might need some additional enrichment. That could be toys, that could be some additional walks. It could be changing up where your walks are. It could be varying the length of the walk or the intensity of the walk or increasing snifaris. There are a bunch of things you can do. Which one will actually work for you? I'll be able to tell you. I just need more information. One of the things that fits into the medical, more so in the dietary category, is the paw licking. And I thought about it and then didn't bring it up at the time, and I'm going to bring it up now. Sometimes excessive paw licking can be a sign of allergies. So this goes back doubly to talk to your vet about your dog's diet. Are they allergic to chicken and chicken is in their kibble? That might solve the problem right there. Particularly, it's not always the case, but sometimes you can see redness in your dog's paws in addition to the licking if they're having some sort of allergic reaction. Even if your dog doesn't end up having a food allergy, sometimes dogs can have environmental allergies. So because you said that your dog has licked her paws but less now, I would be curious about what the timing of that was. Your dog could have seasonal allergies just like I do, which is not fun. Your vet will have some different recommendations for you that it would be if your dog was allergic to what is in their food. So now that we've covered the possible food residue, medical issues, dietary issues, chronic stress, anxiety, or boredom, we're going to go into more so a compulsive habit, another kind of behavior issue. This can be sometimes your dog starts doing something and it becomes a habit. And then because it's a habit, they continue to do it even though it no longer serves them. So maybe your dog used to lick because of one of the many things that I just talked about, but now they no longer are suffering from whatever the issue was. But because they've been doing this licking thing for so long, they like this licking thing, it's become a habit. They're just less likely to stop. In which case, then we build a behavior modification plan if we want this to stop and whether or not that is necessary. Again, we first defer to your vet because just thinking about the implications of this, cause for concern could be we don't want them to lick something that they aren't supposed to. For instance, what if you have a particular type of cleaning fluid that you use on the floor and now your dog just really likes that cleaning fluid, which you might think dogs don't like cleaning fluid? That's weird. Well, there's a bunch of pet products out there that you're supposed to use to spray on something to prevent your dog from chewing at it or licking it. And some dogs just really like hot sauce. So this is not to say, hey, your dog's just weird, but we cannot rule out that potential possibility. So I'm going to throw that out there that maybe your dog likes the taste of cleaning fluid for the floors. Sometimes, again, it's the self-soothing to lick you. I would be curious if your dog starts licking you, do you start petting them? In which case, this might be just a behavior that they're engaging in because they've learned that, oh, when I lick this person, they pet me. It could be them attention seeking. Some additional questions I would ask you are things like when you try to redirect your dog, meaning if you ask them to stop, I'm hoping most likely you're not like yelling at your dog or things like that. But if you move away from them while they're licking you, if you get them a toy instead, if you call them over when they're licking the floor, I would just be curious of when your dog is licking, whatever they're licking, what do you do next? Because that also might tell us whether or not this is just a behavior you have unknowingly trained your dog to do because they are rewarded by something that they like after they do it. This is not me saying your dog is sitting here plotting. Average dog has the mental capacity of 2-3 years old, give or take, depending on the dog. But this is one of the most agreed upon age range comparisons. So I'm not saying your toddler with 4 legs is sitting there plotting like, I guess if I lick my human's arms, then they will pet me. It's more so classical conditioning, meaning that they've just learned to associate subconsciously. I am just going to lick because when I lick, good things happen. It's not even that your dog's thinking about it critically. It's just over time, such a positive association may have been created depending on what your reaction is. Therefore, the consequence is to your dog licking whatever it is they're licking. I know that was a lot of info. Please feel free and DM me after you've listened to this episode to answer some of my questions, and perhaps I can help you tease out the real underlying issues. But I would still recommend speaking to your vet if you haven't already, just to rule out any medical or dietary causes. And with that, we're heading into the third and final question of this week's episode. Okay, last question for this episode was written by a fellow dog trainer who also happens to be a service dog trainer. So thank you, internet friend, for sending this in because this question is giving me the opportunity to nerd out. So they wrote in and asked, I've been trying to figure out the best way to phrase this, and they're asking, what does somebody's breed preference say about their personality, or the inverse? What sort of people tend to be best suited for different breed groups? And what should they stay away from? And so for this person, it's always Briards, but almost never hounds or terriers, but they say in parentheses that there are exceptions. If you weren't as familiar with my takes, what conclusions might you jump to? So thank you, Hounds, Hives, and Havoc. This is a really interesting one. For those of you that are newer to me, I did a whole segment a while back on enrichment tailored to different dog breed groups because I am a huge fan of Kim Brophy, who wrote this book, Meet Your Dog. I am also enrolled in her Family Dog Mediator course that I'm hoping to finish up later this year. Why do I say all this? I am a big dog breed nerd, and there are differences amongst the different dog breed groups. Not just the dog breed groups, but the individual dog breeds. Those who don't nerd out about dogs as much as I do and my fellow dog trainers do might not realize this, but different dog breeds were bred for different purposes. The reasons why humans decided to create breeding programs and intentionally selected certain characteristics in dogs, that is how we ended up with these breed groups. The reasons why is because we domesticated the dog to work alongside us, and as we evolved, as society changed, needs for dogs changed with it. Through this, there emerged several different types of dogs. There are terriers or ratters, these kinds of dogs that were bred to find and exterminate vermin. Already that statement, you can infer that, hey, these dogs are going to have a bit of a prey drive. Prey drive meaning they see something, in this case, a lot of times rodents. They have a natural inclination to find and kill them because that's what they were bred to do. A lot of times those dogs are higher energy. They were bred to be on alert and to go hunt for those things. They were also bred a lot of times to work more independently. They would go off down the hole and hunt those badgers. Already, you can see here, terriers might have a level of intensity that some people don't vibe with. Nothing wrong with it. And on the opposite end, there are people out there that love terriers. The terriers are the only types of dogs that they will ever have. They love the drive. They appreciate their exterminating prowess. They love that they're independent thinkers. They don't mind the quote-unquote stubborn attitude about them. And they love that about those dogs. Another breed group example I'm going to give, because it is, again, very popular, is the herding breed. Common dogs that you probably would have heard of in the herding breed are dogs like blue heelers, Australian shepherds, border collies. What were these dogs bred to do? They were bred to work with humans and work a lot. These are your farmers' best friends. Those that had flocks of sheep. These were the dogs that would round them up. For Australian cattle dogs, they're in the outback amongst large amounts of cattle. They have sturdy heads because the likelihood of them getting knocked is higher than, say, the average dog. For the Australian cattle dog, there's also linkages to dingoes. So the Australian cattle dog was intentionally bred using Australian dingoes and collies from the UK. And the reason why I say this, for those that aren't aware about dingoes, they're not necessarily domesticated dogs. Unlikely that you just have a dingo hanging out in your yard. Okay, the reason why this cross between, and now they're not a cross, now they're their own breed, but the original reason behind creating blue and red heelers was so that way Australian farmers would have hardy, silent working dogs for the harsh Australian outback. Think about it. Those dogs were bred to be out in the middle of nowhere, to survive harsh conditions, to work very closely with their one or two humans, and to be working on the farm. Put those dogs in a city environment, I'm not going to say that it's impossible, but that's not what they were bred for. Now we take a look at another breed group. By the way, and this is also the really fun thing about, I'm just going to keep this book out here for reference. This is another really cool thing about Meet Your Dog is Kim Brophy does set up the breed groups in a little bit of a different way that you might be less familiar with. She breaks them down into the natural dog, sight hound, guardian dog, toy dog, scent hound, gun dog, terrier, bulldog, herding dog, and world dog. And the reason why this is so interesting is a lot of times for those of us that do categorize dogs, you might go through the American Kennel Club, the AKC's type breed groups, Fédération, or you could be more familiar with the FCI, is the Fédération Cynologique Internationale, Fédération Cynologique Internationale, FCI, and they categorize breed groups a bit differently than the AKC does. This is all to say that even a lot of these international or long-standing associations vary in how they categorize the breed groups. Why is this relevant? Why am I going off on this? Is because why a dog ends up in a breed group is related to why they were bred. It's who they are. It's what types of idiosyncrasies and characteristics that are common in these particular breeds because that is what they were bred for. It does not mean that they can't live a life outside of what their breed was bred for, but depending on how different that is from that dog's needs, they might just have a harder time existing. Those of us that fall under that like neurodivergent umbrella might have a bit more of an intrinsic understanding of what that feels like and what that is. The other cool thing though that is part of the Legs Guide is that it breaks down the difference between what is related to the breed group versus what is related to the environment versus what is related to the dog's own sense of self. This is to say, dogs have personalities. One sight hound is not going to be the same as another sight hound. I could put up me and my two younger brothers in a row. Even though we do look a lot alike, we have different personalities. Dogs are in the same way. However, with dogs, and specifically dog breeds, we have chosen to create breeding programs to select specific traits for these dogs, meaning that they are more likely to have certain kinds of personalities and needs because that is what we have genetically selected them for. To this listener's original question of what does someone's breed preferences say about their personality, or the inverse, what sort of people tend to be best suited for different breed groups? And what should they stay away from? This is my favorite topic because the thing that I scream from the rooftops and am probably really, really annoying about if you've listened to a lot of my content is I will talk about compatibility on end forever. I will probably be doing this 30 years from now and still telling people that compatibility is one of the most important things when it comes to choosing a dog and having a good life with the dog, enjoying your dog. Is your dog compatible with you? Is your lifestyle compatible with your dog? And a lot of times why people like or don't like certain dogs is because that personality, that kind of dog, is not compatible with you, or your lifestyle is not compatible with that dog. And some people intuitively know this. For others, it's just a vibe. Now, I believe that adopting a dog, buying a dog, puppy, whatever, when you're making that decision, I think it is multifaceted. I think that having a dog is like having a child. It is like having a romantic or nesting partner, basically your significant other, the person you're doing life with, and it's having a roommate. Your dog lives in your house, you're in a relationship and you do a lot together. And you are responsible for your dog. Unless your dog is a doggy influencer, and even so, you're still managing all that. You pay for all your dog's bills. You're responsible for their medical issues. You're responsible for making sure they get enough exercise, for making sure that they're fed. A lot of the things that parents need to do for children. And this is a toddler that's never going to grow up. Now, the benefit, or one of the benefits to choosing to bring a dog into your life is, despite the funny internet memes, you are not birthing your dog. So that means you get to pick your dog. Now, there are people that are going to come up here and be like, you should give all dogs homes and, my dog chose me and saying that, you shouldn't be picking based on looks, different things like this. I'm not saying pick the dog that you think is the prettiest. I'm saying pick a dog that you're actually going to be able to take care of. Pick a dog that would choose to have you as their owner. Pick a dog that you're not going to resent having for the next 10 to 20 years. That, I believe, is a responsible choice. Some of that could be wrapped up in aesthetics. Don't get me wrong. You might say, hey, you know what? I might prefer this look of a dog as opposed to this one. And I'm going to have the hot take here and say, if your aesthetic preferences align with your needs for a dog, go for it. If you're picking a dog because they look cool to you, but you can't actually take care of them properly, you can't fulfill your needs, then that would be an irresponsible decision. Now, for those that don't know, my first dog was a herding dog. His name was Frodo. I named him Frodo. He was a blue heeler mixed with Malinois and a couple of other things. That was my first dog. I was in my early 20s. A lot of things happened. He was a rescue dog, and he was who was recommended to me by the rescue. If you want to hear the full story, I have it in several other places there on the internet, so I won't get into the weeds with that. After Frodo, I've had 3 dogs from reputable breeders. I have a Silken Windhound, I have a French Bulldog, and I have a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. Now, some people are going to say maybe some of these breeds are controversial for different reasons, a lot of times related to medical. Some people will say, well, one is irresponsible if one chooses to buy a dog instead of rescue a dog. And to this, I say, shop or adopt responsibly. Why I chose to get the dogs I did is I was making sure that I got my dogs from places that they were under contract. So if something happens to me, if I die tomorrow, my dogs go to my husband or back to their breeders. They will never end up in a shelter. Even that, there's several steps, like my friends or family would probably fight to get them, but there's that. So somebody that loves that dog enough to put them under warranty. Medical insurances, does it mean that these dogs are not going to have medical issues? No. But at least I know what can be coming down the pipe. At least I know that certain testing was done, that they are less likely to develop certain things. For all my guys, I picked them, especially the latter 2, on temperament because I learned. So not only did I pick my dogs by the breed types that I knew that I could live with, and more importantly, not just me, my husband could live with, because that's the other thing when you're taking a look into dogs. And this person asked, certain people will be drawn to certain dog breeds versus others. If there is more than one of you making this decision, you go to the lowest common denominator, meaning that if your spouse cannot handle the working breed level of energy, we don't get the Malinois. If you have bunnies and are a proud bunny owner, bunny parent, there are exceptions, but as a general rule of thumb, a terrier might not be in your best interest. So it's really looking at, what does my life look like? What do I want my life to look like? And then choosing your dog accordingly. I can use my dogs as a case study. And I'm very curious after this episode to hear what my internet friend says, because it seems like they tend to pick the same. They really like their breed and will get multiple dogs of that breed. I like having a variety, and I have different dog breeds. They have similarities of why I chose them, but they also do have differences. All my 3 were bred for companionship. They were not bred to hunt rats. They were not bred to herd cattle or sheep. They were not bred to work independently from humans far, far away. Now, were they descended from different breed groups? Yes. Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, even though that she is part of the toy group, part of the companion dog group, and was bred to basically be a lap dog for royalty, she is still a spaniel. And I can see that in her behavior. Kronk is a French bulldog, again, bred for companionship, but still is a bulldog. So does have tendencies that are related to that breed group. Velma is a Silken Windhound. This breed is descended from the likes of Borzoi, who were bred to hunt wolves in a pack in Russia. Her breed, similar to Lilo, is one of the companion breed versions of that. She's not bred to hunt. However, she does have the Sighthound genealogy, so she does still have some of that prey drive in her. So see the nuance here. I did pick dogs that were bred for companionship, mostly because I'm not a farmer. I'm not a hunter. I might live in the countryside. Right now I live in more urban suburbia. But what do I do with my dogs? My dogs are primarily at home with me. They get neighborhood walks. We go on hikes. We do camping and lake trips and things like that. But those are outliers. We're not in the backcountry, in the woods every day. Their primary function in my life is companionship, and their primary activity is hanging out at home or in public with their humans. And so therefore I picked dogs from the companion breed group because there is less friction there that inherent than if I had chosen a dog that was bred for a particular job. Does not mean that those dogs can't thrive in a more companion role, but then you need to find an outlet for those breed tendencies. So what does it say about people if they choose a different kind of dog versus another? Some of that could be dependent on stereotypes or how popular different types of dogs are in the media. We see this classically after 101 Dalmatians came out. Dalmatians became really popular. There has been a spike in demand for Malinois after Fallout, the TV show, more recently released. So there is a component to something being popular. This is not a good reason to get a dog. If your kids love Bluey, please do not make that the reason that you go out and get a cattle dog. I'm not saying that you can't have that dog, but just critically think about what that dog needs and whether or not you can provide them. So that is one reason why, unfortunately, some people do choose certain kinds of dogs. If they are more self-aware, and just not even just self-aware, if they are also more cognizant of what different dogs need. Sometimes people fall into the trap of being aspirational, where they will say, oh, I will get this particular dog because they need this level of exercise and therefore I will rise to the occasion, rather than picking a dog that requires for you to operate to your top potential, to be on your best day as their baseline. I would suggest instead you choose a dog that has their baseline more aligned with yours. By that, I mean, if you're picking someone as your partner who is a marathon runner and part of your relationship necessitates you also running that marathon, but you're maybe more of a Pilates person, not that these are mutually exclusive, there's going to be some friction there. But this is added into the fact that you are this dog's guardian. You are their owner. So if you are unable to meet their needs for whatever reason, you need to outsource that, meaning maybe you need to pay for a dog walker or a trainer or one of those cool dog runner vans where they show up to your house and hook your dog up to the treadmill and just go. I've done that with my 3. They have a blast. Kronk, less so, because he sprints and then he's done. And this is what I mean. You pick the dog based off of what your needs are. I pick dogs where I take them for an hour-long walk in the morning, sometimes less. They sleep while I work, and then we go out for more walks and cuddles and engagement and different things like that. There are some dogs where that would be insufficient. So you want to pick the dog that's going to suit you. Another mistake I see people make is maybe they understand that the dog lives for a good chunk of time, but maybe doesn't factor that into their life planning. So dogs live between 10 and 20 years, depending on the dog, mostly breed related. What dog is a fit for your lifestyle right now? And 10 years from now, if you still have that dog, is that still going to be a fit? Now, the dog will age, right? Obviously, the dog is going to be heading more into their senior years rather than being a puppy. But depending on their health and things like this, they at 10 might still be wanting to go for those 2-hour hikes a day. Are you going to be capable of doing that in 10 years? Will you have other life obligations like aging parents or children or a demanding career? This is not me saying that you shouldn't get a dog if you don't have those things, but I feel like life planning should be factored into when you're choosing a dog because, as I said, perhaps you might need to outsource some things to make sure you're taking care of your dog properly. Then that needs to factor into your budget, etc. Conversely, say if it's I work a really demanding career that requires that I be outside of the house a lot. Now, some people would say, hey, you know what, Kay? I just heard you talk a lot about how great companion dogs are, which they are. They are super great. But guess what that breed group is more predisposed to? Separation anxiety. Not saying that all of them have it. I'm saying they are predisposed to it because it's a function of how they were bred. They were bred to really enjoy being around humans. Their job is to be your companion. But now you're not around for them, and they're getting very lonely because what sparks joy for them in their life is maybe not the hour-long walk in the morning before you go to work, although that obviously helps depending on the dog, but they want to be with you all the time. But because you work so much, you're not able to be there. This is me saying there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to picking your dog. Please put in the research, talk to a professional, and take a really critical look at yourself and your life, and be honest about what kind of dog would actually suit you and vice versa. And I say all this not to be harsh, but truly because I want you to be happy. I want you to be happy. I want your dog to be happy. I want you to be happy together. And compatibility really is at the heart of that. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. Once again, this was Dear Dog Fanatic. I'm your host, Kay. I operate the Canine Detective. Feel free and DM me on Instagram if you have a question you would like me to answer on the podcast, or hit the link in the show notes. I will see you next time. And in the meantime, give your pup some scritches for me. Bye.